I'll be talking about a subject that I love to talk about. I've given this quite a few places. And so the question really is like on the first slide, why do we analyze old, why are you here? I'm kind of surprised that some of you even came because you say, I don't want to work with those old logs. I mean, you've been listening all morning to high technology, high technology. Now, I'll tell you a secret, it's really not any more accurate than the old logs, but that's my bias. But I can see why a lot of people say, well, why do I want to talk about these? But if you do regional studies, which I assume all of you have or will, or a field study, if you work in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Williston Basin, where I worked many years up in Montana, and you're going to need old logs because, as again, like I put, to do reservoir characterization, you're going to have to be able to get something out of these logs. You'll need to correlate the reservoirs, so you're going to have to know the gamma ray and the neutron and any of the correlatable tools. It'll be the fill-in for the more recent logs because, again, even if you have a lot of recent logs, you're going to have an awful lot of data. And the location of possible misproduction. I'm going to show you one great example from the Morrow, we'll say, in eastern Colorado, but using old logs. They should have known they missed production. If any of you did bring your slide rules today, figuring that for this old logging that we'd need slide rules, put them away. I forgot to bring mine. Or if you have an abacus, put it away, because we're not going to do any analysis of that type. We're going to do visual analysis. But they're very important. The old logs are very important, and as I will try to convince you in the next hour, they can be very accurate. Not precisely, not to 5 decimal places, but as you'll get from my talk this afternoon, that I don't think you can take the finest density neutron log and you say that the porosity is 10% or 10.1% porosity. I say, oh, hogwash. It's somewhere between 8 and 9 and 10 and 12. If you take resistivity, which I will show you some of the old resistivities, as I will show you some examples later, don't kid me. I don't care whether it's 7 ohms or 8 ohms or 9 ohms. It depends on what are you after when you do log analysis. And this is especially important to the old logs because they are useful. I'm going to show you that you can get an awful lot of good information out of them. And they are, quote, accurate. You're not going to carry it out 5 decimal places, but as you'll hear from me all this next hour, I don't think you can carry it 5 decimal places any type of logs. But again, I think they're worth doing, and without any question. Just to give you an idea, in the state of Kansas, I had a gentleman who was our computer, our webmaster type of thing. And if you look at the data there, you'll see that, let's see, I'm going to be talking about, we'll say 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I'm cutting off about in here, say the last year, this is 30,000 logs in Kansas that we know about. He doesn't pretend that we have 100% coverage up at Lawrence. But we're talking about a lot of wells. These I'm not going to talk about today. To show you, again, Jeremy mentioned I went to work in 1955. And so when I get to the next slide on slides, I was very fortunate to come in at the end of the, I'll call it old logs, and before a lot of the modern logs. So I have grown up with them. And let me tell you, we found a lot of oil with those old logs. And so they are worthwhile. There's no question about it. History, I mean, you probably all know this, but I think it's important. In 27 is when Schlumberger did the first, brothers in France, as far as the first log. The first electric log in the United States was around Santa Barbara in 1929, 30, 31. The SP log. Now again, these dates, nothing happens today. These are approximate years. 27 to 31, at that time they only used one resistivity log was recorded on a point-by-point basis. Now remember, this is, when I say that, I mean they did this foot, and then they moved the cable, and then they did this foot, and then they did that foot, and yep, pretty good logs. 27 to 31, development of the short and long normal logs. And I will show these in just 1 second. 36, the lateral log. Again, that's going to be the main log probably of interest in the old logs, because the lateral log, now this is not the lateral log with the gamma ray lateral log. This is lateral log, which was the resistivity tool. It was introduced in 1936. Gamma ray in 39, 42 is when Gus Archie first did these first laws, we'll say, for analysis. World War II, for the most part, they ran two resistivities, a short normal, a long normal, and an SP. The 1945, the neutron log introduced, 48, the micro log, and 48, determination of RW from the SP. 51, lateral log and microlateral salt mud surveys. If you were around in those days, there's a few of you that are here, what a stroke of genius these were. Before we had these salt mud surveys, everything was done, we'll say, was on the fresh logs, or whatever you want to call them. It was the old ES logs, the old short and long normal and the lateral logs. And they did not work well in salt mud country. So if you worked in the Williston Basin, or if you worked in Kansas, you had your work cut out for you. The log interpretations were tough, they're very bad. But this was, when they introduced these, this was the great change. Oh, what a great change it was. And unfortunately, this was when I was in college and first started doing some log analysis. 56 to 58, they introduced the induction log and the sonic log. I'll never forget, I was in Wichita at the time. I'd worked for a Pure Oil company in the 50s before it merged with Union Oil. And the Sonic came out, and Schlumberger brought it, and we took days. I don't remember, it's 2, 3, 4 days school on the Sonic log. And I'll never forget, the engineer stood up there and said, "People, this is the log. We don't need anything else. This is it. This is the porosity log. This is the end." And I look now back, let's see, that'd be almost 150 years ago. But yes, if you exactly know, like John and Richard have brought out, if you knew exactly the lithology and you knew the porosity kind of the type, yes, this was probably true. But as you all know, the sonic log by itself, unless you have a lot of data, is not the log of a. So I will not talk anything about these. I'll mention the induction log later on as to why you run the lateral log as opposed to the induction log, but I will cover that later. If you're interested in Kansas and Oklahoma, then this is, again, it's interesting that some of the early logs on the old logs were done in Kansas and Oklahoma. In 1929, Henry Dahl with Gypsy, which of course become Gulf, was in Seminole. They did 28 wells in Oklahoma City field. In the Anthony Kingman area, they did 2 wells and 46 core holes. The city of Anthony, I mean, you all know, is probably better than I do. This is South Kansas, South Central Kansas. The early log research was done in the state of Kansas. They brag today, if you talk to a log analyst, they brag about, oh my God, we finally got the LWD logs. Oh, this is the most unbelievable. What's an LW? Logging while drilling. I mean, something right now is the greatest tool in the world. We've had the greatest logging while drilling tool since about 1936. It's called the drilling time log. And all of you that have sat wells or been involved with wells, and I assume all of you have, this is probably the most accurate log that there has ever been run, if it's done right. Oh, I've spent many a days out there plotting them on the drilling time off, again, originally I remember when the driller would have his board marked to the footage, and he would then put his mark on the Kelly and he'd put the time. But again, you all use this as drilling time. Great log as far as whether you use it as a porosity log or you use it as a resistivity log. It's a great and it's an accurate log if it's done right. So this old LWD that they're bragging about now, they're 50 years too late.